goddamn MG42. Start Charlie! Get somebody up here and draw their fire so I can take them out!
Okay.
Right at it!
Oh, geez, Sarge, what'd you need?
We're going over that ridge. Sniper's gonna take out the MG42.
Geez, Sarge, that MG sounds nastier than Betsy Ross during the time of the month.
Hey, remember your training!
Remember, their bark is worse than their bite.
That's right. Bark's worse than his bite.
Hey, sorry, Charlie. Get another private up. Private Pretty Face! Today on Garand Thumb, the M1 Garand Sniper. Obviously, we have the normal M1 Garand right here, but this is the M1D, a very interesting weapon in many ways. Now, how does the M1D perform? What's the range on it? Is the Garand even a good weapon to make into a sniper rifle? We answer these questions and many others that you've never thought to ask because they just didn't interest you. Today on Garand Thumb, the M1D.
Captain, I think there's crowds in those hills over there.
Now, before we get into that, we of course have to get into the biggest sponsor of the channel. The biggest sponsor of the channel is what?
Gonna be SDI.
The Sonoran Desert Institute. A big thank you to them if you're looking to get your start in gunsmithing. They are the people to go to. We of course have to thank who else?
Primary Arms Optics, critical to the war effort.
Primary Arms. They're making awesome optics. They are of course made at a great price, and a big thank you to them. And what can we not forget, Micah?
Patreon.
Patreon.
And if you want to keep Charlie employed, onwardresearch.com.
Yeah, so Charlie basically relies on Onward Research. Without it, his family starves. We don't specifically want that to happen to him, so make sure you go and check out Onward Research. It rocks. But without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, might have been forgotten, but most certainly not by me.
M1 Garand Sniper Rifles.
Welcome to the channel. Today, we're going to be talking a little bit about this M1D before we do a little bit of practical accuracy testing with it. So if you'll come in and take a look at it, it's actually a very interesting setup. There are three primary sniper variants of the M1 Garand. You have the M1C, you have the M1D, and then you have, of course, the United States Marine Corps doing something different because you guys just have to be different. I don't want to get into it.
Well, there's the M1Ds.
Don't. Now, when it comes to the M1D, there were many improvements made over the M1C, and we'll talk about the M1C at a different point, but suffice to say, the M1D was an easier to put together armor level construction. Now, if you come over and get a real close look at it, so we have the primary method of attachment of it is this thumb screw right here. This attaches it into the barrel assembly. It has two main blocking up points. You can check out Forgotten Weapons if you really want to get into the history of it, but suffice to say, it was more than enough to hold zero of these weapons. Now, the optic is an M84, which is actually a 2.2 power optic. Basically, not much at all, but back then was quite a bit. The optic is actually quite clear. The reticle leaves a lot to be desired, especially compared to more modern optics nowadays. But again, for the time, it was quite good at what it was. Now, if you come to the back here, we do have this rubber eyepiece right here, and you have a sunshade that you can pull forward on the optic right here. Now, because the optic is offset from the top of the action, the reason for that is to load the Garand, you of course have to take an in-block and place it in through the top. So if the optic was on top, you would not be able to do that. So to solve that issue, they offset the optic. Now, of course, the problem would be, how do you line yourself up? This leather cheek piece was added. That way, when you get onto the gun, it presses your head offset from the center line of the weapon. That way you can see through the optic. Now, to be clear, the M1 Garand isn't specifically a very phenomenally accurate weapon. There'll be people who tell you there were probably like 1 MOA Garands, and I'm sure they're out there, but by and far the Garand is about between a 2 to 4 MOA gun. Putting an optic on it and expecting incredible performance at extreme distance probably isn't what you should be expecting. But what we're going to do is we're going to be firing at targets from 100 all the way to about 500 and seeing how easy it is to get good impacts on those targets at those various distances. And we're going to kind of gauge the M1 based off of how it does. Now, to be clear, this is a certified M1D according to the CMP, so this is as good as you're gonna get when it comes to that. We are firing Greek HPX ammunition that is very close to the USGI ammunition used during World War II. And to be clear, when it comes to the M1D, what's really interesting about it is that although it was adopted in the 50s, it didn't serve in the Korean War. In fact, the M1D didn't serve until about the Vietnam War. Now, the M1C, although it was adopted during World War II, didn't really see action in World War II, mostly saw action in the Korean War, as a quick note for you guys. But enough talk. Ammunition is expensive, talk is cheap. Let's get out and do some shooting.
Hey, we got some krauts out there.
It wasn't in World War II.
Hey, we got some bastards.
So we have the M1D, we have a target at 350 right here. Now obviously the Garand is well capable of doing this. Will the optic make it easier? We're firing Greek HPX, which is a good analog to USGI ammunition used during World War II. We're gonna go ahead and give it a shot and see how we do, no pun intended.
A little high, Cap. Just still a little high, keep dropping on your little right. Just a little to the left. Impact. Impact.
Okay, so a little bit of trying to figure out the reticle. Again, we're not super familiar with this particular one. We've been shooting it for a good amount, but you're always gonna have a little bit of kind of figuring out your dope. Once we got it figured out, it really wasn't too bad. The problem with the M84 reticle, and we'll give you guys a view through it right here as I'm talking about it, is that it gets a little thick. Even at 300, 350 right here, it's partially obscuring or almost completely obscuring the C-zone steel. And the problem with that is, although the C-zone steel isn't the size of a human being, you have to understand that people aren't always square to you. So in that case, it really isn't that crazy of an idea to have a reduced size target. Now what we're gonna go ahead and do, we're gonna take a few more shots at 350 here, and then we're gonna step it out to 400, 450, and we'll try for 500, but I'm guessing that's probably gonna be a little bit more difficult because, again, the Garand isn't a precision rifle. Let's give it a shot.
Can I say something real quick?
Yeah.
So I will say, I think that the C-zone steel makes a lot of sense considering the people in Vietnam were super skinny. I mean, they were. A little high left. Impact. A little high left. Impact. Impact.
Cool, we got it pretty well dialed in. It's a good time with the M1 Garand. Let's step it out. All right, we are here at 405 yards. We're gonna be taking a shot at the reduced size steel and seeing how the M1D performs.
Looks a little low to the right. Impact. High right. High right.
Yeah, I see it.
Impact.
All right, so we got it dialed in on there. So I found it's roughly the same hold as we were at about 345, which makes sense with 30-06. We're not seeing that much of a drop. The reticle actually does make this significantly easier compared to firing with iron sights. I'm actually kind of surprised. Originally looking through the optic, I was thinking that 2.2 really wouldn't mean jack shit, but yeah, past 300, the optic is 100% a good thing to have. Micah, agreed?
Oh yeah, I thought irons were gonna smack it all day long, and that sucked. But no, that's actually not that bad.
No, it's actually pretty nice. It's actually fairly easy to hit. So we'll load up some more, shoot a little bit more on it because it's just damn fun. All right, we're at 500 yards right here. Now, a thing to know is we're not proned out, we're not bagged. We're kind of in weird shooting positions, but let's see how it goes.
Low left. Be on line, right?
Just
No
low.
trace. Bring it up a little bit. You're off to the right just a little bit too. Oh. Just a little bit to the low right. Elevation. You're just off to the right a little bit.
Just off right?
Yeah.
Okay.
I like the idea of this, but I mean, as soon as you start shooting, those Viet Cong are gonna start running.
Dude, right?
They're a little slippery.
Dial this guy
So Grandpa said.
up a bit.
Impact. High right. Right. Impact. High left. Left. High. High.
You know, I'm getting that reticle at the same location. I'm starting to see a little bit of spread. We might be hitting kind of the edge of what this military ammunition is going to be capable of, but we'll give it a few more shots here. Low. Impact. Good job, buddy.
All right, thank you.
Load it up. I couldn't spot it. Right.
It
2
was a
feet.
bad trigger pull on my part.
All good. Right. Elevation good. Right. Elevation good. Low left. High right. Low. Windage is good. Right.
Gosh darn it, Captain. I'm no good with this damn thing.
So the M1D, we've done a good amount of shooting with it, both today and a lot in the past here, because I just love this weapon so much. Let's talk about it a little bit, especially as we've been able to push this thing out to range. I've been able to shoot this thing out to about 700. It's about the furthest we've pushed it so far. And the biggest thing holding the M1D back is 100% going to be the optic. And it should be noted that the Marine Corps made a far better choice when it comes to optics, because they picked a 4-power optic, which would be so much better than the 2.2 we have here with the M84. The biggest problem I think with the M84 is going to be the reticle itself. Yeah. Essentially, you have a cross and there are no hash marks. There's nothing to really dial it in. So you can, of course, make adjustments off the knobs as you're making your shots, and those are 1 MOA adjustments. But, you know, compared to a modern optic with a modern reticle where you can kind of start hashing things out and getting your shots dialed in, it's certainly a little bit more frustrating when it comes to the M84. Do you agree, Aaron?
I'd say so, yeah. Who's Aaron?
Oh, sorry. It is certainly a little bit more frustrating, right, Admin?
I would say so, yes.
How was your experience shooting through this optic?
I would say very frustrating. I wish I had more time, more logistical support, a little bit more training.
Yeah.
I could see like if you had the like in-house knowledge of like, okay, you have a lot more time to work on it, but out here just kind of like picking it up and going, I was a little bit frustrated trying to find it.
Well, that was the whole point here. And I think no matter what, a 2.2 is just not a lot, especially when you push out past 400. So I've seen some anecdotal evidence that these would get out to 800 to 1,000. I think that would be pushing it. I'm sure a skilled marksman could probably push that, but I think in all reality, about 500, especially using military ball ammunition, I really don't believe that combat effective, they're really going to be able to get past that. Mike, I mean, I'm not crazy here, am I?
No. 700, like, I was making adjustments real easy at anything up to like, what was it, 450, 400?
Yep.
And then as soon as like 700 gets around, they're all over. I think it's beyond the limit, to be honest.
I think so. And again, the Garand is a great rifle, is a phenomenal fighting weapon, but it is a battle rifle. It is not a DMR. It is not a sniper rifle. This being pressed into military service does make sense. Now, when we talk about it being pressed into sniper service, one thing that we have to take a look at when it comes to the M1D is you have to understand that the M1C had a lot of problems as far as being built out to be a sniper. There's a lot of issues about whether or not the final gun would be accurate or not. So by having the barrel assembly that has the scope mounting platform on it, this is a superior mounting solution compared to the M1C. Now, Mike, if you come in here and take a look really quickly, I think what's really cool about the M1D is how the optic is removed. So it's this little knob right here. You can just simply unscrew that and it comes right out. So there are some issues there. Whew, that thing's hot. There are some issues when it comes to this particular mounting solution, and mostly that comes to the fact that we have these surfaces right here that make contact, and then of course you have your screw right there. Now, as long as those are in good condition, you're gonna be able to hold that zero fairly well. The big problem really comes into the threads, where the optic actually threads into. So there's of course a torque value that's associated with that. Whether or not that torque value made it out to the unga bunga grunts out there, we'll never know. I would guess that we probably stripped out some screws. When it comes to these, I know guys in the military, having served in the military myself, I would say that 100% I would have stripped this bitch out. Now, once we have the optic off, if we remove this leather cheek piece, we do have a very functional normal Garand. And to be clear, this cheek piece is pretty sick. Leather, it is treated, and you can also see the year that it was made, in this case, 51. So a little piece of history right there. I think that's something to me that's really cool. This is a Winchester Garand, as you can see there from the back. But yeah, you remove that, you can still use the iron sights. In fact, even with the cheek piece on there, you can still get into the iron sights really well. So if your optic were to fail for whatever reason, you're easily able to get on those irons. Now, there are some issues when it comes to these particular optics, and that's mostly on the coating that's on the inside. In fact, on this guy, you can kind of see it, it's shaking loose a teeny bit, but the coating on the inside of the lens tends to flake off. So what happens is that over time, you'll get these little pieces of paint and coating that begin to get on the lens and kind of make things a little bit harder to see. This isn't a perfect optic by any means, but it was certainly good for the time. Now, otherwise, when we talk about the M1D, we essentially just have your good old M1 Garand. So there isn't a whole lot to say about it that we won't get into in a full review of the M1, other than to say that when we remount the optic, there are a couple interesting things to note. So we'll get that thing lined up, and we're gonna try to not unga bunga this.
Unga bunga.
All right. So one thing to note is that with this particular optic, if you don't have it torqued down to the proper values, and I've run into this before, the scope can have a tendency to slide forward in the mount. What will happen as that occurs is that you won't be able to load an in-block in there.
So just real quick, one thing I thought about like a wargaming aspect is, I mean, of course this didn't get much service in World War II, but I mean in Korea or Vietnam, I mean more so Korea, like I imagine a bunch of dudes, not just like one guy, like your specialty DMR or sniper guy having this, but like imagine your entire platoon of riflemen having that.
Like Battlefield 5.
Like Battlefield 5, right. Like I know it sounds kind of video gamey, but I think that'd be really interesting, like seeing what kind of force multiplication you would get off that. But
I mean, it's like when all the Marines were given ACOGs during the Battle of Fallujah,
just
right?
making nonstop headshots.
Exactly. The Marines really put some hurt out there. So there's something to be said about magnified optics, and certainly it helps. And so we did shoot the 308 Garand at all these distances as well. And immediately when you see the size of that front sight post, especially at like 500 plus, I mean, an optic is 100% better out there. And even for threat identification, so what we call positive ID in current military talk, the optic is certainly a much better choice. But oh shit. Dude, my pitch is hot. But overall, I think final thoughts on the M1D, a really cool rifle, and one that I'm really happy to have in my collection. Just a cool piece of history. Didn't really end up seeing too much service in the case of the M1D, but still, I think it really definitely holds its own, but was certainly, by the time it got to the Vietnam War, was 100% outclassed by other weapons.
Right.
But as with everything, what's really gonna matter is going to be training, right? So you talked about it, you had to pick this guy up with not a whole lot of training behind it. If you train on this guy, you're gonna be deadly with this thing. And those GIs, those grunts who use these rifles were extremely deadly with them. You hear a lot of stories about the M1C from the Korean War where guys were just absolutely able to decimate the enemy from far ranges. So get out there, get training, guys. That's what matters. If this is the only rifle that you have, as long as you're training with it, you're gonna be good to go.
It's a little scary. Imagine some dude that's a wicked good on an M1D.
Wicked good. Just getting vibe checked
Just
by a
getting
30-06.
vibe
Yeah.
checked. Yeah.
That'd be a real bad day. And you know, as always, guys, thank you for watching. Stay looking cool. We appreciate you. We've got nothing else for you. Final thing from administrative results, dad advice for the audience.
Yes, guys, hey, firearm safety is super important. So what's the first rule of firearm safety?
Fire.
Looking cool. Stow it. Looking cool. What's the second rule of firearm safety?
I don't know.
Don't look uncool. You turbo virgins. I got nothing else.